if you're thinking about taking your family on a climbing, camping, hiking adventure, watch this video. I just got back with a family, and we have a 7 and 9-year-old on an awesome vacation. And so I want to share with you some of the things that we learned, what worked well for our kids, some of the places we stopped at, some of the climbs we did, things like camping and just practical things along the way that might help you as you plan your trip. So we are coming from Minnesota, and our first area that we want to hang out is the Black Hills. From the Black Hills, we're going to do Devil's Tower, off to Ten Sleep Canyon. There's Cody next, and then Yellowstone, Tetons Wind River Range, and then back to Lander, kind of finishing that loop off, which has Wild Iris and, Sinks Canyon, and then back through the Black Hills and home. So that's kind of the general loop. So for us, stop number 1 that we're hanging out is the Black Hills. It's worth noting as you're driving out to the Black Hills that there is the Badlands National Park. It is definitely worth, stopping at, doing an hour hike, getting up on top, seeing these crazy formations, breaks up the drive a little bit as you're heading out to the Black Hills. But as far as us staying in the Black Hills, we camped at Wrinkled Rock Campground. It's a free campground in the National Forest right behind Mount Rushmore. I've stayed there several times over the years. I love it. They have tent platforms. There's an outhouse there, and it's a good central spot to kind of break out and do all kinds of climbing and adventuring. As far as the areas that we climbed, from the campground, we can walk right to the South Seas area and, had some really fun, accessible climbs there, for the kids. Another day we went to Custer State Park. It's an incredible park with tons of climbing. But even on the drive, like you're driving through the tunnels, there's wild bison that you might run into that are roaming around, that we, saw. One thing with Custer that was interesting that I'll share with you is we went there to climb, but we got some rain. And so since we had the gear, we ended up doing some rappelling. And that was cool because we probably wouldn't have otherwise taught our kids how to rappel on this particular trip. But they loved it, and it was a really cool thing to build in some skill sets. And so something to consider, that I would definitely do again. And we just kind of accidentally did it only because we, got rained out and the rock was wet and, not very climbable. Another thing in Custer, like the wildlife is kind of crazy. A deer walked up to us, as we're hiking in and then trying to set up for the rappel. And that's just one of those fun things about, being in the outdoors. Those little surprises. Another day of climbing we did right there in our campground. So between the campground and the road is a nice rock formation, more rappelling, some fun climbs for the kids. One thing that we noticed though during this time right away is that our kids and us as a family, after about a half day of climbing, we're ready for something else. Our kids don't want to climb all day long. They love climbing and it's fun, but it takes up about a morning. And there's so much to do in the Black Hills. So our, basic rhythm was to climb in the morning, and then, one evening you can go check out, Mount Rushmore, which is like 5 minutes from the campground. Wind River National Park was about an hour away. We went and checked that out. And then the kids, one of their favorite things to check out was this gold mine tour, Big Thunder Gold Mine. That was about 15 minutes from our campground. So that kind of completes what we did in the Black Hills. From there, we are off to Devil's Tower. And, with 7 and 9-year-old, we're not doing multi-pitch. We're just not ready for that. So we're not getting to summit, but there is the lower southwest buttress, which is the area right below what you think of Devil's Tower. And so we were able to find a pretty accessible climb. It took up our full 70-meter rope. We hopped on that, and again, you're outside, and we had deer ripping through right at, where we were hanging out in between climbs, which was, pretty crazy. So that was a fun experience. As far as camping goes, we ended up, just driving in, and it's kind of first come, first serve in the park, and we were able to get a spot, no problem. If that didn't work out, our backup plan was to do Devil's Tower Lodge, which is right super close and climber friendly. I've stayed there as well over the years. From Devil's Tower, we're heading to Ten Sleep Canyon, and this is where we're getting our real sport climb on. there is tons of limestone, endless climbing, huge area, well developed, and really worthwhile stop. We ended up, camping goes, we ended up sleeping at Tent Sleep Rock Ranch. Friends of mine have stayed at the Circle J in the past, which is, right up the road as well. And there's lots of free dispersed camping, as you head up like that Lake Creek area, which lots of people are doing. So lots of easy, accessible camping options for you in Tent Sleep. As far as the climbing goes, first day we did Mondo Biondo area. We found some easier climbs there and then some taller ones, but it's still pretty challenging for the kids. They were able to be pretty successful. So day 2, we went to Lake Creek, which was, even easier. And they had a blast on the psychoactive wall, lower psychoactive wall, pocket puzzle and hole patrol. And those climbs were great because the kids, were able to reach everything. It wasn't, anything was too spread out that they could grab. And so doing that again, I would do day 1 at Lake Creek. That is a best crag for an introduction to kids or even beginner climbers, to Tent Sleep, in my opinion, and then going to, some other crag like Mondo Biondo that has some, moderates as well. Again, things to do in the area. In the afternoons, we were finding ourselves jumping in the creek every afternoon. And, it's hot, feels great to cool off, and it is a legit mountain creek. It is freezing cold, but, pretty fun to hop in. And timing-wise, it worked out. The rodeo was going on in town. Every year, Tent Sleep has a rodeo July 3, 4, and 5. And so we were able to kind of bop into that in the festivities, which was a fun little small town experience and sleepy little Tent Sleep. From Tent Sleep, we had to do advanced reservations for Yellowstone because that's our next stop. Had we done that differently, we probably would have spent a day or 2 in Cody. There's just a lot to do there, but we didn't have that foresight. So on the way to Yellowstone's only about a 3-hour drive from Tent Sleep Canyon. 2 hours into it is Cody, and they have Buffalo Bill Dam, which is this 350-foot dam we're stopping at. And essentially at that same stop is a whole bunch of climbing. There's the island, left side, which has some really moderates, like there's a 5.8 and a 5.4 there that, we had a lot of fun, and then some harder stuff around the backside. And it's like you park your car and you walk 20 feet and you are climbing. And so you can't really beat that as far as amazing climbing, super accessible. And that's right there in Cody. That drive finished out and we're in Yellowstone. So that was a nice break to get to Yellowstone. We did a bunch of climbing up until that point. Now we have a couple days just to, do some hiking and sightseeing. Yellowstone, we're seeing the Grand Canyon of Yellowstone, the waterfalls, the wildlife, right outside the car in Old Faithful. And that's just a fun experience, to be in our first national park, showing the kids that and experiencing that together. After that stop, looping down, we did the Wind River Range. And that's only because we had a 2-day gap between our reservations at the Tetons. It makes way more sense to go from Yellowstone to the Tetons, but we didn't plan that well. So anyway, we had the 5-hour drive down to the Wind River Range. And we did the Wind River Range because we want to give our kids a real backpacking experience. At this point, we're sleeping in a tent every night, but that's car camping. We're pulling up our car, setting up a tent, and we want to give them a backpacking, trip where we're carrying in our own, gear and food and everything, and just give them a different experience. So as we pick a place, I want to go to the Cirque of the Towers and show them, be like, hey kids, you can go climb. Let's come back and climb these someday. So the Cirque of the Towers, to get there, we parked at Big Sandy Trailhead. It's about a 20-mile hiking loop, about 10 in and 10 back. And, it brings you up to Jackass Pass, which is kind of the top. We ended up camping at Arrowhead Lake. And so we did 2 days in there. Amazing time. And it's, a pretty legit hike. You have real water passes. There is, snow passes. There's some scrambling. And the altitude, is no joke. And, how far you're hiking up. So that was a pretty awesome, intense hike, and our kids thrived. They were able to do it, and we came out with smiles at the end, which I had my doubts early on, but, kids are tougher than you give them credit for. From, the Wind River Range, we're heading back up to the Tetons and spent a couple days there just hanging out, seeing the Tetons and exploring. And because we had such a good backpacking trip, our kids wanted to do something else. And so we looked at, we were able to walk in and get, a 2-night backcountry permit in the Tetons, super easy to get. And that wasn't an issue at all. So we ended up doing the Paintbrush and Cascade Canyon Loop. Some people can do that in a day, but for us, 20 miles, we brought our gear and we spent 2 days doing it, and that was about right for our crew. And again, snow passes, water crossings weren't quite as bad, but that was a pretty awesome, hike as well. Leaving the Tetons, we are going down to Lander, and that's where Wild Iris, we're getting some more climbing again. We're done with the backpacking deal. Wild Iris, Sinks Canyon. And as far as camping there goes, right at Wild Iris is some free camping in the National Forest. They have bear boxes, they have tent platforms, there's outhouse down the road. There's also free camping in the Lander City Park. And so you got a couple good options there as far as camping goes. Wild Iris, really cool Dolomite climbing. We ended up finding this really fun stemming move, which our kids haven't felt, what it's like to stem in between 2 big rock formations. And so that was cool just to continue to build those different, skill sets and experiences as far as climbing goes and, feeling different moves. Sinks Canyon, really cool, tall Dolomite climbs, awesome sport area. We found some really tall, moderate stuff that, we were able to, more or less kid-friendly and find some success on and get up super high off the ground. Timing-wise, we're able to time that with the International Climbers Festival, which is usually mid-July. So that's a great time to plug in, be around other climbers, and just tap into the climbing scene. And that really completes our loop, starting in the Black Hills, kind of finishing in Lander. On our way home, we're heading back to the Black Hills and home again. And what I would say as far as like just takeaways from the trip is, first thing, as far as our family goes, we found that 2 days at any location was about the right amount of time. You're able to experience the area, and then you're kind of ready for that next adventure because there's so much to do and see out west. Obviously, you could spend a lifetime at each one of these areas, but for our crew and our family, we found that about 2 days is about the right amount of time at each little destination and stop. Climbing, being out there for more of an extended period, like you could really see the progression, and our kids took it slow, from rappelling to swinging around the ropes and getting comfortable and doing some moves. And with the longer you can go as a trip, the more we're able to see their confidence level and their skill sets build, as they're trying to go harder and further, and just becoming more comfortable, with the climbing and the moves and the rock. When it comes to the hiking itself, that was just kind of an add-on, but it actually ended up being the high for our kids on the trip. As we got back and people were like, hey, what was your favorite part of the trip? Both of them are saying the hiking. And that was surprising at first, but in retrospect, it makes sense because the hiking was honestly probably the hardest thing we did. We're going into the backcountry. They're carrying their own backpacks. It was tough, it was rugged, it was challenging. And to push our kids and for them to find success in building that confidence and doing, something that's like pretty epic, for their age, and to overcome that and just realize how capable and strong they are and how far they can push their bodies. They were able to do that with the backpacking part of our trip. And as a result, that was their favorite part because I think they're the proudest of what they accomplished, doing those 20-mile hikes, with some huge elevation gain and going over some pretty crazy terrain. So hopefully that gives you some ideas as you plan your next family adventure. I know you've been to some of these crags and done these things, so in the comment section, leave below other things that you did, routes that are kid-friendly that you would suggest at any of these crags, things that we didn't do that other people might want to consider. So leave that in the suggestions below, and hopefully we will see you out there adventuring with your family.
That was amazing.
Did you see it?
Yeah.
Yeah.